Hi, I'm Tara, and welcome to Let's Do Books. Today I'm joined by KJ, whose debut book is Learning to Swim, which is out now on Amazon. Authors are readers too, so I'm really excited to learn more about the lesfic that she loves. Welcome, KJ.
Hi, how you going, Tara?
Good, how are you?
I'm great for a Sunday morning. Thank you so much for getting me out of bed.
You are welcome. So, you're here to talk about some of your favorite authors. And before we go any further, we just wanted to put the message out there for people. There may be spoilers in the conversation coming up. So if you're listening and you realize that there's a book you haven't read yet, you either need to accept that you might get a spoiler, or you should just go read that book and then come back and listen to the rest of this conversation. So before you start talking about who the authors are, is there anything that you would say is kind of common between them?
Yeah, I mean, they're vastly different. The three of them that I'm going to talk about are incredibly different writers, although I probably think that the writer that I'm going to talk about, Georgia Beers and Melissa Brayden, have similar dialogue styles. And the other author I'm doing is Clare Ashton, and she's very different. But I would say that the three of them are able to realise that they need to connect with their readership in a way that some writers disconnect, in the sense that they write and they do a beautiful novel, but there's always that sort of invisible wall between the reader and the author.
So why would you say they're your favorites? Like, because you only chose three, but I know you're a reader, so like, what is it about them that made sure that they made the cut?
You gave me a restriction of 3 to 5, so because I had possibly more, a lot more, so I went with 3 and decided to talk a lot about those 3. But I would say those 3 give me I get to jump into their world, particularly Melissa Brayden. I get to sit alongside her characters and feel like I'm sitting in the coffee shop enjoying the dialogue and hanging out with the characters, and it's really quite lovely. And a lot of the time with Georgia Beers' novels, I get the same thing. And with Clare Ashton, it's not the characters I get to sit alongside, it's the setting. I get to be part of that setting and feel like I'm in a really lovely lesfic sort of, TripAdvisor, where I get to sort of go to that place.
Uh-huh. So who do you want to talk about first?
Let's go with Georgia Beers. I mean, she's every single novel I absolutely adore of hers, so it's really hard. So I chose one. And simply because it's the one I cycle back to constantly, because it seems to have, I don't know, she has depth in all her novels, but this one has so many layers to it that I go back and I find something again, even though I've read it 100 times, I find something again in it that I didn't realise was there. And that novel is starting from scratch.
So for people who haven't read it, for the 3 people who haven't read it, can you tell us what it's about?
Yeah, there's a character called Avery King. She's a 34-year-old graphic designer in an advertisement company. And she has a dog called Steve. Her life is really quiet and comfortable. She's just a regular person. And she has this thing where she bakes, and her grandmother taught her. And there's this lovely connection between her and her grandmother. And she also lusts after the bank manager down the road, and she finds that this is this sort of pedestal that she puts this bank manager on. And it's quite cute, actually, the way that she sort of resorts to this sort of teenage fangirling moment every time she walks into the bank. And I find that quite fascinating, actually, because she has her life pretty much all together, and then she just falls apart every time she walks into the bank. So it's quite cute, actually. Yeah, so there's this sort of interplay between the two of them.
So what do you love so much about the way Georgia Beers writes?
I think it's because that she's able to, it's quick dialogue. It's actually quite fun. There's definitely humour there, and I think I think that's what works the most, is the self-deprecating humour that the characters have, and this sort of sense of not taking themselves seriously, even though in some of her novels, if I'm just going to deviate slightly from starting from scratch, in some of her novels she has these very serious characters, but they that is sort of like always seems to be with her novels, these characters who are serious. That's just their shell. The sort of self-deprecating humour does come out in the end. So that starts with Avery King. She starts like that. And Elena, the character who is the bank manager, has that as well. And I think she writes them as if they are real people. You don't get this sense of they're untouchable. They could be actual real people if you actually met them.
So, is there anything else you want to share about why you just love Georgia Beers and you would recommend her?
Yeah, look, I like the way that they seem to be all set. I don't know anything about America, much at all. And I, even though I read a huge amount of lesfic, I don't really know a lot about it. So I know that they're sort of set in the same type of area of America, these novels. And even though I can't pinpoint exactly where they are, and, you know, I don't need to have a map to realise that these places, and particularly some of her novels, are all set in the same place. That place exists as a she makes it feel real, even though it's probably not. It's real. I could go and visit there, and she puts life into this setting, so that these real characters exist. And I think that's what I connect with the most, is the fact that these people are people that I could actually walk down the street and see. I can. When I read her novels, I can actually see these people hanging out in the town, hanging out, randomly going and, you know, collecting their mail or whatever it is. They just seem to be real people. I think that's probably the best part of it.
Mm-hmm. So who is the next author you want to talk about?
Oh, okay. So it's lovely, actually. I get to segue into Melissa Brayden, who is probably my favourite. Oh, gosh, putting a label like that's hard. Okay, she's one of my favourites. Look, they're all my favourites. She's there. Let's just put her down as she's a great author. And I would say that the thing that I love about Melissa Brayden is her dialogue, her character dialogue. Oh my gosh. I would love to be able to have a comeback, or to be able to snap out some sort of witty dialogue like the characters. And it's almost like I get to fulfill some type of really cool fantasy where I'm completely not this person, but I get to live through one of her characters and be this amazingly awesome, witty person who can snap back with some type of cool interaction with their friends. And I'm completely not. I sit there in cafes with my friend and sit around and look awkward. So we don't get to do that, you know. So I get to live vicariously through a Melissa Brayden novel. I mean, that's what the thing with. I think that's the other thing I wanted to talk about was with Melissa Brayden's novels and with George Beers's novels, is with that stuff, with the content, you get that both of those writers, they write novels that do what they say on the box. They're not predictable. That sounds like they're predictable, but they're not. They are. It's like lounging in a comfy chair in your favourite room where, you know, you get to look forward to something and relish it. You know what's going to happen. But the way that both of them are able to create this sort of journey that you get to sit inside, both of them have that technique, and I think I love that about them. Anyway, Melissa Brayden. Let's. I'm going to ramble about hers. And the one that I want to sorry, I'm rambling. But I really love this novel, and this novel is one of my favourite ever, and it's called Eyes Like Those.
I adore that book so much.
There's so many elements to it that I absolutely love. Do you need a quick synopsis of what it's all about? Okay.
Yes. I mean, I don't, but somebody listening might. So let's do it for them.
All right. So I don't do it justice in my little sort of rambling. So can I read the blurb on the back? Because I think this is one of the best blurbs.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So it says, Isabel Chase is reeling. She's just been offered her dream job as a staff writer on one of the hottest shows on television, and quickly trades in the comfort of New England for sun, sand, and everything Hollywood. While stoked for what could be her big break, her show's stunning executive producer has her head spinning and her feelings swirling. Taylor Andrews is at the top of her career. Everything she touches turns to gold, and the studios know it. Just when she's on track for total television domination, Isabel Chase arrives in her office and slowly turns her world upside down. Isabel is intelligent, sarcastic, and damn it, downright beautiful. Unfortunately, she's the one person who can take away all Taylor has worked for. Will Isabel's success lead to Taylor's downfall, or perhaps Isabel is all she needs? It's so swoon-worthy, and that's just the blurb.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really,
so good.
You can't do anything with that except go, okay, I need to read this 1,000 times, which I have. Actually, I must tell you, though, I mean, I read everything that Melissa Brayden has written. I was just thinking the other day that, well, the book, that book was my first Melissa Brayden novel, and I spent the next 3 days on a Brayden binge, and I read everything, absolutely everything. And then I tweeted at her and said that I'd done this binge of all her novels. And she replied with a series of laugh emojis and a heart. And if that isn't like a wonderful visual representation of all her novels, then I don't know what is.
I know, and it's such a good one. When I read it, I loved it so much, and I was almost heartbroken at the same time, because I think Kiss the Girl was my favorite forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And then I read Eyes Like Those, and I was like, oh no.
Yep.
Oh, I feel like I'm cheating on my favorite book with another book by the same author.
I mean, I loved the Soho series. I thought it was excellent. And she's another writer who, I mean, I've never been to New York. I wouldn't have a clue what it's like. But she's another writer who can make you feel that you've got just enough of a Lonely Planet sort of tour guide that you can feel like you're part of it. And it's the same with the Seven Shores. I that's what I was thinking. I've never been to LA or wherever this is. I've never been to California. I can't relate to much of the book in that sense. But I was just thinking the other day that it's hardly surprising that we navigate our way back to texts that mirror ourselves. I mean, on the surface, there's nothing like Eyes Like Those. It relates to me. As I said, I've never been to Los Angeles. So it has nothing to do with TV production. I haven't got a clue. I'm not romance novel beautiful. I mean, who is? That's the point, I guess. But what Melissa Brayden did when she wrote this novel is she sort of sat at the table in a cafe while I imagined how my friend and I would banter. And then my friend says to me that she loves my humour, and I go, woohoo, I've got humour. And then she says that she hopes my panic attacks have eased, and that's the thing. That's the exclamation mark moment. Because when I read Eyes Like Those, and I read the dialogue to die for, and the character who has these intense anxiety attacks, which was so detailed and so absolutely on point that it's like she's either writing from personal experience or her research is outstanding. And even though it's only a part, sorry, spoiler, even though it's probably a part of the novel because everything else is so much at the forefront, it added such a depth of meaning to me that I can't help cycling back to it. And I just thought, yep, she's got it. She knows it. And that element of Isabel is obviously massively important because it's the turning point of the novel. It's the sort of the crux of the novel. But the way she's able to build up to the point where Isabel makes a decision based on her anxiety attack is quite interesting, actually.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, I'm someone that lives with anxiety too, not necessarily the same point that Isabel does because I've never had to like go lock myself away somewhere, but I've definitely had it where it's like that little demon in your head that's telling you bullshit all the time. And it felt so validating to read that book, and I just felt so seen. It was a totally different reading experience than anything else for me at that point.
Yep, I agree, and that's the thing. I think with these three authors, I'm going to get onto my third one in a minute. With these three authors, I feel like their characters are so down to earth and so sort of self-deprecating, not to the point where they put themselves down. I can segue to something that Hannah Gadsby said in her Nanette series about self-deprecation and how you put yourself down to the point of lowering yourself below others. But these characters are self-deprecating in the sense that they don't take themselves too seriously. And I feel like the authors write from a place of truth where they don't take themselves so incredibly seriously that they write these characters they don't write characters that are untouchable. They write characters that are touchable, and I think that's because they themselves are like that as well. Not that I know them personally, but I feel like I do. I think it's because they're the three authors that I've been able to connect with on Twitter, and it's been quite lovely to have that interaction. And it's unusual, I think, because I send tweets, and I think, and I sit there and go, when I get a response or they like it or they reply, and I have my little tiny minuscule fangirl moment where I go, oh my God, this famous person replied to me and it's so exciting. And then I reply back and they don't. And then I think, yeah, okay, I've just scared them away and they think I'm an idiot. But, you know, that sort of thing. They reply.
Mm-hmm, they do.
You're listening to The Lesbian Talk Show. TheLesbianTalkShow.com, your hub of podcast information.
So, your third author.
My third author is Clare Ashton. And, wow, the book I've chosen is The Goodmans. And I hadn't come across Clare Ashton before at The Goodmans, and which is a dreadful thing, and my life is poorer because of that, but that's okay. Now I've rectified that situation, and now I am an absolute Clare Ashton fan, which I did. It's so embarrassing. I got, again, dorky, fangirly, dreadful moment where I sent Claire a tweet. I have no idea what it was about, but it was something inane. And she responded back, and then I said something about how, you know, Wales is, you know, not all that it's cracked up to be, which was idiotic. And then I said wonderful that she was writing about Wales, and I love the fact that she's got this setting, and isn't Australia great as well? And I just, anyway, whatever it was. And then, of course, she literally blew up my inbox by sending me 1,200 photos of Wales and tagged as many Welsh people into it as possible. And I literally, you know, insulted the entire country of Wales. So that was fun. But that's the type of humour that I love. Mm-hmm. And I think you get that humour in The Goodmans, but this is why it's different. The characters are in Melissa Brayden's novels and Georgia Beers' novels. The characters are the people that you sit alongside and get to know. In Claire's books, and particularly The Goodmans, you sit alongside the setting. The setting is a character. And it is quite amazing, actually, because more than any of the other books, I feel like I'm actually there walking along the streets with Abby and Jude, and the cobblestones and the little houses and again, I've never been to Wales, but I feel like I'm there more than any other book. It's quite remarkable.
I felt that way about Poppy Jenkins as well.
Yeah.
I think the setting in that was stunning. That was the one that made me want to just like book a flight and head on over right away because it was so beautifully done. And then there was also this just like totally lovely romance at the same time in that one. But The Goodmans, do you want to share what it's about?
Again, I'll read I've got two parts to read. I've got the blurb, and then I'd love it if I was able to read the first paragraph, because I think that is the most amazing piece of literature I've read recently. So the blurb. The lovely Dr. Abby Hart lives in her dream cottage in the quintessential English border town of Ludbury, home to the Goodmans. Maggie Goodman, all fire and passion, is like another mother to her. Amiable Richard, a rock and 60s child Celia, is the grandmother who she never had. But Abby has a secret. Best friend Jude Goodman is the love of her life and very, very straight. Even if Jude had ever given a woman a second glance, there'd also be the small problem of Maggie. She would definitely not approve. But secrets have a habit of sneaking out, and Abby's not the only one with something to hide. Life is just about to get very interesting for the Goodmans. Things are not what they used to be, but could they be even better? It is so cool. What a wonderful, and that's what I love about this, that Jude and Abby do have this amazing relationship and do get together, but goodness me, so much else goes on.
I think we need to avoid, as much as I said there will be spoilers in this episode, I think we should avoid spoiling the massive twist
in this one.
Yes, we will.
Because, yeah, like I remember reading it And I want other people to be able to have this experience because it felt like somebody punched me right in the gut. And I think it took 3 days for me to get over that book.
It was quite profound, and I won't mention anything, but that really, really threw me, and I agree. I sat with it actually, and that's not being metaphorical. I literally did sit with the book in my hands when I finished it, and I couldn't quite comprehend it, and I did. I actually sort of thrusted at my wife, I didn't sort of hand it to her calmly. I thrusted at her and said, "You have to read this. This is the most incredible book." And she's not a huge reader, but she takes my recommendations, really well. But I did. I said, "You have to read it, and you have to read it now." And I physically pushed her down to the armchair and said, "You must start reading this, and I'll bring you cups of tea, and I won't talk." So she did. She read it. I think it was the novel and not the fact that I wasn't talking, but the fact that she actually read it. It was wonderful, and she agreed how amazing it was. But yeah, I haven't done that for a long time. Just sat with a novel and sort of mellowed on it and stewed on it and let me sort of think about all the elements. And the first thing I did after I'd done that is go back and start reading it from page 1 again. And I had to. I just had to.
Yes, absolutely. I did. I'm trying to remember because I haven't read it since. I haven't been able to read it again because it was so emotional. So I didn't go right back to the beginning, but I did kind of go back partway through and then go back through certain scenes and was able to read it with a totally different lens.
Yes.
And it was just so powerful. So what's that first... Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, without giving anything away, I do the same thing. I go back to certain parts as well now. And the part that I go back to is when the family get together for the very first time, Jude turns up. And that where they're all sort of standing around in this sort of looking at each other like some sort of old-fashioned painting, and they don't really know what quite to do. And at that moment, and if you read from there, knowing what you know at the end, you think, okay, wow.
You do.
That's a good point to start from, actually, is that very point. But, the part that I wanted to read. Oh, and I was just going to say that, I'm a really fast reader. I tend to sort of almost read down the centre of a page, and it's not good. But anyway, I enjoy them, but I just power through them. But Claire's novels, they force me to slow down and reread section, as I talked about. But normally I will read through and then I'll reread afterwards. But I actually... Every time I read this book, I stop halfway through and then reread a little section, then just keep going, then reread it. It's like I'm reading in a loop.
Uh-huh.
And I don't do that normally. That's not how I read, but I had to with that one because it had so much to it. And this is an example. All right, I've got here. Dr. Jude Goodman was certain of many things. Her beloved hometown of Loughborough, in the rolling hills of the Welsh Shropshire borders, she imagined eternal. It was a quintessential and timeless English town with medieval sandstone walls encircling Georgian streets and timber-framed houses. At its apex, an ancient church tower rose above the pastel and brick terraces and glowed red in the sun's rays. Change came slowly to this place. It's the opening paragraph. How can you not read a novel after that paragraph?
It's so good. It's so beautifully done. It's one of the few books that actually... it actually made me cry. I don't cry very often when I read. And it's not necessarily any of the stuff later in the book, although maybe it happened then. But the one that really stood out for me was when they were at the party and Maggie, Jude's mother, is she's looking at Jude and she's kind of remembering when Jude was little.
Yes. And
kind of mourning all the versions of Jude that weren't around anywhere except in her mind.
Yep.
And as a parent, and I have daughters, so for me that was just like, it was so beautifully done and so perfectly captures that idea that yes, you delight in every new stage and you mourn at the same time.
I agree. I have a 9-year-old son, and I regularly regularly, once a month maybe, I will come across some sort of memory on Facebook that pops up, and he's there being all 1 or being 5 or something like this, and I just think, oh my gosh. I mean, it's incredible the stages, and of course he's come in a different way to us because he was adopted. So, and we don't have any photos from 6 months prior to that. We adopted him at 6 months. So all of those milestones that we have, that's incredible when you actually see them in big jumps like that, because the everyday is just, eating cereal in the morning or looking at him and going, you haven't brushed your hair, mate, come on, things like that. But all those big jumps are incredible. And she encapsulated what it's like to sit back as a parent and realise that the little pieces of string that we have connecting, they just being cut eventually, and it's quite a strange sensation.
It is. So how many of her other books have you read?
That was it. That's that's it. Yeah, I need to, update myself. That's not good. I have to go through and get some more reading under my belt. It's hard, actually. I don't want to read too much while I'm writing, but because otherwise I sort of feel like I get messy in my head. I haven't been reading a lot lately, but I will get back onto that.
The thing that I find interesting about her that is different from the other 2 authors here, and frankly different than most other authors I've ever read, is that no 2 books of hers are the same. They are all wildly different, sometimes to the point of different genres, and you will not get another The Goodmans again from her. Just as a I don't want to call that a warning necessarily, but like, she has a rom-com, she has Poppy is just like a straight up romance. After Mrs. Hamilton, I don't even know what to call it. There is no other book like that. That's for sure.
No, and it's interesting because yes, there's obviously lesfic element to it, but it's drama. It's family drama. You get so much involvement with that. I mean, I'm pretty sure I've read one of hers that was a photographer and a executive that, I think it's hers, where the photographer falls out of a tree because she's trying to, in the opening scene, she's trying to get a photo of some politician in London, and they spend a night together, and then she goes to work at a newspaper, and this executive becomes the head of the newspaper. I don't know. It could be one of hers. Yeah.
Is it That Certain Something?
Yes.
Yeah, that is hers.
Yes. Clearly I pay attention. But yes, that's it. And yes, you're right. It had nothing to do with the Goodmans completely. And that's why I wasn't sure about the author, because they are literally such different styles of writing.
Mm-hmm. They are. So is there anything else that you would want to tell people about Clare Ashton, or actually any of these authors? Is there anything else you want to share about them or the lesfic you love?
I was going to say something about, with Clare Ashton's book, the book is dense in that proper meaning of the word, where you have to take your time. As I said, you have to take your time, whereas not to say as an aspersion to sort of say that Georgia Beers and Melissa Brayden's books you can read in a flash, because I do, but that doesn't mean they're not enjoyable. But with Clare's, you can't help but go slow, because they're almost like a more multi-layered book, which is different. Again, it was just the Goodmans. I mean, I read That Certain Something really quite quickly, but if I want to have a really happy moment, if I want to pick myself up, if I want to have just a read that I just feel like I need to smile all the way through it because I want that and it gives me that, then I'll read a Georgia Beers or a Melissa Brayden. It makes me smile the whole way through, even though there's angst, even though there's stuff like Isabel, the character of Isabel, going through her massive anxiety attacks, and they're clearly hard work. Still, it makes me smile all the way through.
So, KJ, where can people find you online if they want to connect with you?
I'm on Twitter, and I'm at Property of KJ.
All right.
It's all I am as far as social media goes.
Well, that is all this episode. Thank you so much for joining me.
That's okay. Thank you.
So, I'm Tara. You've been listening to Les Do Books. Remember to email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with your questions or comments. If you've enjoyed this episode, please check out the show notes where you'll find a Patreon link for The Lesbian Talk Show, or visit patreon.com/thelesbiantalkshow. Our patrons get exclusive content like bonus podcasts and interviews that no one else gets access to. You can also join our Facebook group, The Lesbian Review Book Club, to talk about these books and anything else you're reading and loving. To find this and many other great shows, all you need to do is search for The Lesbian Talk Show on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, or Spotify.